Okay, so there's been a change to the world's biggest and worst lasagna. And fair warning, before I get into it, let me just say that there are layers to this recipe that are basically like the equivalent of laying down a bunch of Brussels sprouts, slathering peanut butter on top of that, and then just pouring some grape soda on for good measure, because you hate the people who are going to eat this dish. That's the level of bad weird involved here. So let me see if I can start by just catching us up on all of the ingredients so far. First, you've got the far-right conservative Heritage Foundation, who were involved in, setting up a list of potential appointees for the 2016 Trump White House, and, basically have spent the last 3+ years creating this 900-page lasagna with lots of things in it, like allowing employers to stop paying overtime wages, eliminating the National Weather Service and National Hurricane Center so that we can't prepare for extreme weather events like floods and fires, taking away the basic rights of LGBTQ plus citizens, taking away reproductive freedoms and rights, and a whole lot of other things. So who actually wrote this plan and put it together? Well, this is sort of where it gets interesting. 31 of 38 people who were considered primary authors are actually former Trump White House staff. They worked for him, they worked in the White House, they were appointees, maybe they were on the transition team or had some other kind of formal role. While we don't know what all of the ties and relationships are like between the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 and some of their biggest donors, we do know that they're in touch pretty regularly, so it's a good guess that billionaire donors have had some type of impact on this particular lasagna. Also, many of these billionaires fund right-wing nonprofit foundations or nonprofit organizations. We'll talk about that more in a second. And some of them even have ties to MAGA justices on the Supreme Court. Okay, so enter 100+ conservative organizations who sign on to this, Parmesan 2025 as it gets popular with some very weird people. For example, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute is a nonprofit funded by some of those billionaires I just mentioned. It advertises itself as promoting the American tradition of liberty, but apparently also loves some very weird ideas that undermine democracy and liberty, such as, for example, hosting J.D. Vance at a speech talking about giving parents an extra vote in all elections, one vote for each child plus their own vote. Pretty weird. More on J.D. Vance in a moment. Add one part Hungarian dictator Viktor Orban, who has close ties to Vladimir Putin and visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago a couple of weeks ago. He also visited Trump back in March. He visited other people that Trump has worked with in the past, like Steve Bannon. He visited the Heritage Foundation CEO, Kevin Roberts, and senior staff for the second time. They met back in 2022. They met again this spring and signed a cooperation agreement to share tactics. Okay, so let's get to J.D. Vance. He's the new VP pick for Trump. He's also, as many people have said, a very weird guy. He apparently doesn't like cats or ladies, but he grew up in suburbia, and he's cosplaying as a hillbilly. I don't know. Other people are handling that. I'm not an expert. It's pretty weird. But he also has close ties to Project 2025 and some of the people behind it. For example, he is pals with Heritage Foundation CEO Kevin Roberts. So much so that he wrote a foreword for Roberts' forthcoming book in which he said, "It's time to circle the wagons and load the muskets." All of this is a little bit confusing because former President Trump himself literally said, "Parmesan 2025 is extreme and I had nothing to do with it." Well, he didn't say the cheese, but you know what I mean. Which brings us to the latest ingredient change. The guy who had nothing to do with it and doesn't even know what's in it has apparently forced out or pressured one of the main people behind it, Paul Dans, who was the director of Project 2025, and who used to work for him. I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to think of that, but it certainly feels like, I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. So what's next? Honestly, I have no idea, but good odds it's gonna involve some conspiracy theories and something very weird, like putting a green jello layer into a lasagna and saying it's a vegetable for your health or some other weird thing. I mean, is that any weirder than anything else these creepy guys have come up with?